by the ICJ regarding Israeli settlements, which are illegal under international law, and we've also been told they've been expanding in the Palestinian territories for years. What can you tell us about that? And very especially in light of the fact that the genocide's happening on the Palestinian people. Will this ruling make any difference as far as the Israeli authorities are concerned? Or do you think they will in fact start regarding this matter in a very serious light?
No, governments don't regard legal issues in a serious light, in my view. They have their political agendas. And the problem with the courts, of course, is they have no enforcement mechanisms. They rely on states, especially through the Security Council of the UN, to actually enforce and sanction their rulings. And that never happens in terms of Israel, which Israel knows. I think the context here, it's a very important ruling because it raises the level. You know, we've all argued for years and years that this is illegal, that Israel is going into an apartheid regime, that this is settler colonialism, that there's genocide happening not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank as well since the Nakba, and that Israel's goal is to take over all of Palestine and erase the Palestinian presence. Now we have some legal backing for that, which, you know, it might not be the weapon that we need, but it certainly is an important weapon because it raises this from opinion and debate and ideology to a legal basis. And basically the ICJ said three things, or to three different parties. To Israel, it says your occupation is illegal. Your presence in the occupied territory, whether it's settlements, whether it's infrastructure building, whether it's the looting of resources of the Palestinians, whether it's impoverishing the Palestinians and locking them into enclaves, that is illegal, and you have to stop it. And not only that, you have to evacuate the settlers. There's 750,000 settlers. So that's important. To the U.S. And all states, the ICJ said, you're under an obligation to enforce this ruling. This is a legal ruling. It follows international law, and it's your obligation to ensure that it goes forward. And that's important because the United States is pushing this normalization process with the Arab world that is liable to really endanger the Palestinians. And finally, it says to the UN, we want to hear specific measures you're going to take to enforce, this ruling. So I think it gives us some credibility, legal arguments, and some weapons to use in this struggle.
Thank you for those insights. They're very, very fairly put across, very unbiased. So thank you indeed for that. Unfortunately, we also know that, as you've also indicated, that the court's findings are not legally binding, and the Israeli government has ignored previous decisions. So you kind of wonder then, what was the point of it all if it is not legally binding? And as far as the government is concerned, they're not obligated at all to make any changes as far as their current actions are concerned.
No, they're obligated. There's no way to enforce that obligation. Because Israel knows that it'll never be sanctioned through the Security Council, and the powers that be that have their own interests, like normalization, are not going to listen to the ICJ. And that's really, in a sense, a balls in our court. Because the ICJ is saying basically to us, the people, your governments have to do this. This is the law. There's no way out. They can't argue their way out of this or justify what they're doing. But just as we've been saying, they're not going to do it. So who is going to enforce that? It has to be civil society. It has to be the people rising up and demanding that our governments actually enforce the ICJ ruling. So, we've had this tremendous outpouring of support for Palestinians in university campuses all over the world. London the other day had about 300,000 people in the streets demonstrating. That's important, but the demands are very general. Divestment, a ceasefire, which is important, but localized, Palestinian rights. This gives us some real specific demands to make of our governments. You have to dismantle the settlements. You have to get Israel out of the occupied territory. You have to, by law, address Palestinian rights. The problem with it, of course, and Palestinians are a little disappointed in this, although that's the parameter of it, is that it only deals with the occupied territory. And it doesn't deal with Israel proper, which by itself is an occupation. All of Palestine is occupied. And so it doesn't help us in terms of the one democratic state solution that we believe is the only solution to this whole thing. But it does help us on the way to certainly put pressure, specific measures our governments have to take in order to abide by the law of the world.
You touched on the one. There's so many questions I still need to put to you, because as you're speaking, things pop into my head. You spoke about the one democratic state solution, yet Western governments like the UK and the US are talking about, whenever they engage on the Palestinian situation, they talk about the two-state solution. Politicians here in South Africa are also banding that idea around, and we know that the Palestinians truly believe that that is not workable at all. Do you think that that reality will come to pass sooner rather than later, or do you see this genocide ongoing for much longer yet?
Well, of course, the genocide is ongoing, but let's remember something. The very purpose of Zionism, its very purpose from the beginning of the 20th century, when it invaded Palestine, basically, the Zionist agenda was to take over Palestine completely, to dispossess the Palestinians, to take their lands, and to replace them with Jewish settlers, and to transform an Arab country into a Jewish country. That purpose has not changed. I mean, if you look at today at Israeli policies, they're building settlements like crazy. They're expropriating land. We're right at the cusp, really, of just finishing that apartheid process that Israel, then Zionism began 100 and some years ago. So there's no chance that Israel would ever agree to a two-state solution, first of all. Second of all, it's buried. It's gone. Like I said, there's 750,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank. There is no more West Bank. We call it Judea and Samaria. And with a vast network of highways, it's all been incorporated into Israel. The Palestinians have been marginalized into little tiny enclaves. And so the governments know that there is no two-state solution. But it's a great conflict management tool, because they can say the right things. Yes, we're for Palestinian rights. Yes, we should negotiate. No, Israel, you shouldn't build more settlements. But in fact, the two-state idea simply allows them to prolong negotiations, this whole process, for years and years, and never come to a conclusion. And that's why, in my view, we have to reject the two-state solution, which anyway is unjust. I mean, why should the Palestinians have lost the other 78% of Palestine? Even the two-state solution is not just. And so the only just solution, as I said, we're not going to get into it today, is one democratic state over all of historic Palestine, where everyone has equal rights of citizenship, something like what you did in South Africa.
Okay, we do need to go for our first ad break. When we come back, we'll be talking some more with you, Professor Jeff Halper. And as co-founder and director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, an all-important question now that Gaza is almost decimated to the ground. Let's just imagine, imagine probably an ideal situation. Let's assume that genocide stops and common sense prevails, and the Palestinians and the Israelis start talking and start engaging and negotiating about how to move forward. What is going to happen with the situation in Gaza, the rebuilding? And we're hearing things like it's going to take 30 or more years to rebuild Gaza. How does your organization come into the picture? Who's going to pick up the costs for the rebuilding and the resettling, not resettling, but allowing the Palestinians' right to return to their homeland? So all of those questions and more right after the ad break.
This is Salam Media.
Are you planning a wedding, birthday party, corporate event, or any special occasion? Kane's Catering Services got you covered. Our catering services are here to elevate your event to unforgettable heights. From tantalizing appetizers to mouth-watering main courses and desserts, our culinary creations are crafted with passion and precision to delight your guests' taste buds. Our spit braai is a talk of the town. Indulge in succulent, tender meats, slow roasted to perfection over an open flame. Kane's Catering Services chefs bring creativity and expertise to every dish they prepare, ensuring that each bite is a culinary masterpiece. We take care of your guests while you relax and enjoy every moment of your function. Whether it's plated meals to a simple buffet, we are on top of it all. Ready to start planning your perfect event? Get in touch with us today to discuss your catering needs and request a personalized quote. Let us take your event to the next level with our exceptional catering services. Kane's Catering Services, situated at number 373 Jabund Lovo Street, Pietermaritzburg. Call now 033 342 3511 or email us on info@kanees.co.za for Pietermaritzburg and surrounding areas only. Visit www.kanees.co.za.
Contact Lenasia Livestock and Poultry for all your Sadaqah, Akika and Qurbani requirements. We offer clean, hygienic abattoir style and refrigeration facilities. Sheep, goats and cows are available at competitive market-related prices, direct to the public. We slaughter, slice and distribute on your behalf, but that's not all. Introducing Meat Masters Halal Butchery, our sister company situated on our farm in Lenasia. Unbeatable prices on lamb, beef and chicken. Lenasia Livestock and Poultry. Livestock is our business. We are Sanha approved. Telephone 011 857 1774. Call now.
After the recent attacks on Gaza, many families have been displaced with their homes left destroyed. Through your donations, our teams are on the ground in Gaza, providing support and delivering necessary aid to families affected. The people of Gaza need your help. Give hope. Donate today to Penny Appeal South Africa. www.pennyappeal.org.za 031 1100 573.
We are here on the ground with Penny Appeal organizations in Gaza.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
It's exactly 8:19 a.m. News and views on Salam Media. Thank you for being with us. I do hope you're going to keep us company over the next 2 hours. And of course, we're talking with Professor Jeff Halper. He is the co-founder and director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. Welcome back. I posed a couple of questions to you before the ad break. Would you care to respond, please?
you have to understand the logic of Zionism and of what settler colonialism means. I mean, you've lived in South Africa, so you know, it's not just a number of policies and you can do this or that. There's a logic to it. Genocide is built into settler colonialism. You can't take over another people's country, throw them out, take their lands, replace them with your own people, that, you know, and not do genocide. That's a textbook definition of genocide. So to go from there to the idea that somehow there can be a two-state solution, that here Israel came in, Zionism came in with the intention of taking over Palestine. It took over Palestine. I mean, all of Palestine, from the river to the sea, is controlled by Israel. That's why the UN says it's an apartheid system. It's locked the Palestinians into small enclaves, demolished their houses, which is a part of the ethnic cleansing genocide. About 160,000 homes have been demolished since the Nakba in Palestine by Israel. And so, and it has international support, including now the possibility of normalizing with Saudi Arabia, not to mention the other Arab states of the Abrahamic Accords. Why would Israel want to turn around when it's winning, when it has everything, when it has international support, including in the Arab world, and say, oh, okay, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe we'll give the West Bank, East Jerusalem, with Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Gaza, maybe we'll give it back to the Palestinians. I mean, it's ridiculous to even think like that. And so, you know, so the idea that Israel's going to somehow resettle Gaza, no, that's not going to happen. Israel destroyed Gaza for a purpose, and that purpose was not to resettle, to get rid of 1 million or 2 million Palestinians. And here is where humanitarian can be the enemy of political. What's Israel going to do? It can't just drive them out, right? Egypt certainly won't take 1 million Palestinians, but think about this. Since these are poor refugees, which isn't true, they've been made refugees, then we, the liberal democracies of the world, will take them as refugees under the guise of humanitarianism. The United States will take 50,000. Canada's already said it'll take 60,000 or more. Britain, Europe, Australia, who knows, maybe South Africa. And in that way, under the guise of humanitarian aid to refugees, Israel will be able to rid itself of a good portion of the Gaza population. And it's Israel's intent, of course. It knows that everybody's not going to leave, but they're going to confine them to the southern part of Gaza, to the Rafah area, which is one reason why Israel didn't destroy all of Rafah. But the whole north of the Gaza will, in my view, never be resettled. And of course, nobody's going to pay for it either. I don't see, they say it's going to take 5 years just to clear the rubble. Well, I don't see the international community stepping in with the billions of dollars necessary. And it serves Israel's purpose, and it's uninhabitable. So that's why we have to really understand the logic, the processes, Israel's intentions behind house demolitions, behind the destruction of Gaza, behind settlements, in order to come to what could be a just resolution. The only way out of settler colonialism is to decolonize. Israel and Zionism have to be decolonized. All the structures of domination and control have to be dismantled, and a new country between the river and the sea with equal rights for all its citizens. I mean, Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs, plus, of course, the refugees that return. That's the only way out. Now, why a democratic state is so outrageous to governments, I don't really understand. Freedom, democracy, equal rights, that seems to be a pretty good program to me. And it's the only way to end Zionist settler colonialism.
Sure. What a very, very sobering insight to the situation. This clearly is not an overnight fix. This is going to continue for years and years before there's some sort of a resolution, and hopefully a solution that is viable for both parties. Let's look at the just and peace-loving Jewish people that live in Israel versus the Zionists. Are you guys managing to live in peace? Are there ongoing clashes, discussions around what is going on in and around, Israel, the fairness or the unfairness or the horrors of the genocide, how is it impacting on the Jewish and the Zionist people in Israel? I'm kind of thinking huge psychological issues. How do people even live with a conscience knowing this is happening in our backyard? This is happening to me as a peace-loving Jewish person, knowing that I'm living on stolen land. I've destroyed people's homes, livelihoods, futures, including their farms. During this genocide, we also know that olive farms have been totally destroyed. And I kind of wonder, how do people move forward? We're also aware of the fact that a lot of Palestinian people were employed by Jewish establishments. Never mind how they got there with long queues. They had to queue for hours on end and pass through a whole host of checkpoints. By the time they reached their workplaces, they were exhausted, but they had to do it to put bread on the table. But we do know that that was a fact. So how is Israel then continue to possibly operate normally, knowing that this all is happening in their backyards?
First of all, they don't know what's happening. Israelis have no idea what the Nakba was. They have no idea what their history was. And on the contrary, this is our land. There's no Palestinians. Israel until today has never, ever, ever recognized the existence of a Palestinian people, let alone its national rights. You heard Netanyahu's reaction 2 days ago to the ICJ ruling. There is no occupation. How can you occupy your own country? The land of Israel is ours. Just go to the Bible. And so, there's no issue here. We're coming back. It's our land. And then what you do with the Arabs, as we call them, because we don't call Palestinians because we don't want to legitimize their national identity. So the Arabs then get reduced to criminals, just attacking us. That's where the word terrorist comes in. And everything is reduced to security. So yes, Israelis want peace, but they want peace, between the river and the sea. They want a peace with the settlements. They want a peace where Israel has annexed Jerusalem for the last 50 some years. They want a peace where Israel is legitimized, its apartheid system. And if the Arabs agree for some reason, then there'll be peace. Israelis are not peace-loving. Israelis, are committed to the Zionist enterprise. And so, what you said at the beginning, I don't think is true, that this is going to go on and on and on. No, I think it has an ending. And I think the ending is now, you remember just before October 7th, Netanyahu stood up in the UN on the podium of the General Assembly, holding up a map of Israel between the river and the sea, the greater Israel. There is no Palestine. And he said, now we are about to normalize this situation with Saudi Arabia and the rest of the so-called pro-Western Arab world. I think that's one of the reasons why Hamas attacked on October 7th. I think if that had gone through, if they had signed a normalization agreement, that would have erased the Palestinians. As a people, it would have legitimized and made permanent Israel's apartheid regime, where the Palestinians are locked into 8 or 9% of their country in little Bantustans. And that would have been the end. It would have been normalized. That's how settler-colonialism ends and succeeds, by normalizing. So this is, and Biden has said, and Trump has also said, this is bipartisan, that as soon as the fighting dies down in Gaza, we're going back to the normalization process. Saudi Arabia is desperate to normalize with Israel. And so, the Palestinians mean nothing. And it goes back to the beginning of our conversation about law. The whole world is run transactionally. Israel brings a lot to the table. It has military prowess, has a strong economy, it's got high-tech sophistication, it controls an important geopolitical part of the world. What do the Palestinians bring to the table in a transactional world where justice and international law mean nothing? Nothing. I mean, they're not powerful, they have no resources, they certainly have no clout anywhere, and so they're going to be erased. And that's why it's incumbent on us, the people, to stand up for the Palestinians. The Palestinians themselves have to come out with a political program that they want us to advocate for. And then we have to do, in a sense, what the ANC did. Forget governments. And we have to go to the international community, the people, the international grassroots, and create that same anti-apartheid movement that you had. I think we have to replicate that in many ways. But this has an ending. And I think the ending is supposed to be in the next few months. Biden wanted to end it before November when he was running for president. Now, it doesn't matter so much, but don't forget, Trump was the architect of the Abrahamic Accords. He's the one that annexed the Golan Heights to Israel and said, yes, you can do your settlements. So, no, this might not go on for years. I think Israel's on the cusp of winning.
I'm just wondering about all of that. We've just heard that Biden has pulled out of the running in the presidential upcoming American elections. He has obviously touted Kamala Harris. We also know that Trump stands a very good chance of being re-elected. What does all that mean for the current situation in Palestine? Because we do know that the Western government and Western society as a whole have been supporting Netanyahu. They've been supplying all of the arms and all of the armaments. So that's a very, very big question that needs to be addressed. And let's also look at the situation around currently. We understand that Israel is now bombing Yemen or going after the Houthis. You've also spoke about, and we're all aware of the normalization, or Saudi Arabia wanting to normalize relations with Israel. So there are so many factors involved here. I'm kind of wondering, and I started talking about this right at the beginning of the 7th of October, that there is a possibility that we might see the entire Middle East going up in flames. So where do we stand? It's not only Saudi Arabia that's wanting to normalize relations with Israel. Other Arab countries are on that same page as well, leaving the poor Palestinians to a horrible and dismal fate going forward. It seems as if the only people standing up for them are the Houthis, and Israel's going after them.
And the peoples of the world who are pouring out for the Palestinians.
Absolutely.
Look, you know, people don't know this, but since 1967, by a formal agreement between the United States and Israel, the United States is the sole mediator of any negotiations, of any peace process. Europe has no role, Africa has no role, Latin America, it's all reduced to the United States and Israel. And we know that the United States supports Israel wholeheartedly in a bipartisan way. You know, in 2006, I think, when Israel had another terrible assault on Gaza, the US Senate passed a resolution supporting Israel by a vote of 100-0. Unanimous. You know what? When the United States went into World War II, the vote in the Senate wasn't 100-0. So this is what we're facing. The international system means nothing. Everybody has agreed that this is in the Americans' court. The Americans support Israel. And of course, you know, the Arab states like Saudi Arabia support Israel because it has much more to offer them, like I said, than the Palestinians do. I wrote a book called War Against the People. And I try to explain that Israel has really carved out for itself a niche in terms of, on the one hand, enforcing global hegemony. So, you know, the US wants to get out of the Middle East, but protect its hegemony here. And so Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt will be the pillars of a new Middle East NATO. But Israel also helps repressive regimes stay in power. You know, it's got the whole Palestinian laboratory in the occupied territories to test and develop weapons, surveillance systems, technologies of repression, and so on. So that's the problem we're facing. We're in a world in which, like I said, international law means nothing. The UN is dysfunctional, And it all just comes down to the United States. And that's why I think the peoples of the world, I come back to that. Maybe it's weak, maybe, because we're not very organized. And the Palestinians haven't presented a program that we can really get behind yet. But we're the only ones that are, in the end, can stop Israel and stop the United States. We have to think about that. How do we organize in a way that we can really affect government decisions? And we're not very good at that.
Professor, I could sit here talking all day long to you. Very, very interesting points that you've raised there. At the same time, very frightening indeed. And I think the one glimmer of hope I've had from this discussion is you suggesting that this has to end, and it will end sooner rather than later. My thinking was that it was going to take years. It's probably going to take years and years and years. But you seem to be more optimistic as far as that is concerned. However, however and whenever that goal is in fact reached. I want to end off by asking you about India, the Indian government supporting Israel absolutely and wholeheartedly, to the point that we understand the first batch of 6,000 Indian construction workers have arrived in Tel Aviv, Israel. What is that all about? My thinking is that, is this then perhaps more settler homes and areas going up by these construction workers? What are they doing there? And how is Israel going to deal with them? How are they going to be housed?
No, they're employed by contractors to do the big infrastructure work, like in Tel Aviv. They're building a subway in Tel Aviv. This big infrastructural project. They don't deal with houses, private houses. That you have local labor for. We have to remember that Hindu nationalism of the type of Modi developed in parallel and in contact with Zionism. They shared ideas, they shared philosophies, and until today, that's true. Israel, like I was going back to the weapons, Israel's the number 2 arms supplier to India after Russia. And I'll tell you something else. Israel's the number 2 arms supplier to China after Russia. So that Israel isn't simply a client of the United States. If the United States ever did change its policy drastically, it could jump to the BRICS countries, except for South Africa and maybe a little bit Brazil. Russia, India, China are very supportive of Israel and always have been. So, that's the problem we're facing. It isn't like we can play one side against the other, go to the BRICS and use them as a counterweight against the imperialist West. They're all together because they all want Israeli weapons and surveillance techniques. The Chinese cameras over the Uyghurs, are Israeli technology to a large degree. Israel imports Chinese surveillance technology in the West Bank. If you go into the West Bank into Hebron today and look at the cameras, a lot of them are made in China. So that's the problem. Until we can tackle that kind of security-based thinking in the international world, we can't really get anywhere because, again, human rights, justice, international law doesn't really mean much in the international arena, I'm afraid.
I'm going to wrap up with this final comment, and I'd like your response to it. The American elections are coming up, and despite whoever is the Democratic candidate, what do you think, or how do you think this will play out? My husband and I were having a discussion this morning, and I said, I think Kamala Harris, as the first Black American female president, will probably get a very big vote. She probably would outrun Trump. And my husband said, not a chance, not a chance. Trump psychologically has gotten into the heads of the American people already. And I'm wondering, how do you suppose it's going to play out? And if Trump does once again serve as president of the United States, do you think there's going to be a huge shift in policy as far as the Middle East and Israel is concerned? Or is it going to get worse rather than better?
Right. On the one hand, Kamala Harris polls worse than Biden did. I don't think she can beat Trump. She has no real policies, and in fact, she doesn't have the support of the Black community, because she was very hard on the Black community in San Francisco when she was the prosecutor. So I would hope that another candidate emerges, like Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, that I think could kill Trump. I think Bernie Sanders could have killed Trump, but I don't think Kamala Harris can. But even if she does, so what? It's the same policies. I mean, there is no difference between Trump and Biden and Harris in terms of Israel. It's, Biden was here after the war began and said, you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. Kamala Harris would say that with no hesitation whatsoever. So we can't look for change in American policy unless, and hopefully, the young people in the United States are starting to rise up and speak out and not support candidates that are in favor of genocide in Gaza. So I think there are openings. I think we can organize. I think Palestine has become a global issue at the level of the anti-apartheid struggle. But there's nothing to look for from the different politicians that are going to get elected, including in Israel. Even if Netanyahu goes, and he'll go in the next few months, you're going to get Gantz, who's a right-wing, vicious general, just the same. So I don't see any policy changes happening anywhere that are meaningful.
Professor Jeff Halper, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Like I've indicated, next time around, we'll probably set aside an entire hour just to dig deep into all of these issues and much, much more. Thank you. God bless and stay safe.
Okay, thanks for having me.
It is exactly 8:41. News and Views moving along. Our next guest is on standby, and that, of course, is you, Salman Fredericks, activist and lawyer, and you too are going to talk to us about the recent ICJ verdict on apartheid Israel.